Do you believe that God has a sense of humor? I just asked you that. Well, I think he does. Let me tell you what happened. In the United States Capitol, Harry Reid, Barbara Boxer, and the Democrats had an all-night marathon advancing global warming. And they said we had to be in fear of global warming. So God says, Harry and Barbara, you've got it all wrong. And he dropped the temperature 40 degrees, sent so much wind that it knocked out the lights in the Capitol dome, first time in years. And it's still cold. And now Chicago, we're hearing it's the coldest maybe on record. And once again, they're in the deep freeze. And the Lord is saying, Democrats, it isn't going to happen that way. Well, I think that's, isn't that fun?
Crazy.
God has a sense of humor.
Did they get it? Huh? Did they get it?
No, they didn't get it. No, they didn't get it. But that's just the way it is. But anyhow, it's cold out there. Well, we don't know quite what happened to that airline. People are still trying to figure out what happened to that airliner in Malaysia. It's a very, very fine airplane, and yet it went off the radar. And we understand you can't get radar across great stretches of ocean. I used to fly. I thought those transponders would pick up anywhere. And of course, they have satellites to monitor them. They should be able to pick up I mean, if they can pick up your car driving along someplace, they ought to be able to pick up an airplane.
True.
So
I read somewhere that the pilot can actually turn that.
Well, you can,
off.
but no pilot in his right mind would turn off a transponder. I mean,
Well, unless he was pressured to do so.
Well, yeah. Well, you fly and you take off, and you hit the controls, and they say, well, squawk 8500, and so you set the thing, and that's your transponder. And so you're squawking beep, 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 and they pick you up immediately on the screen. But from a satellite perspective, they can pick up airplanes from satellites, and they should. I don't understand it. But anyhow, some say the plane may have stayed in the air for an extra 4 hours, but the government of Malaysia says that's not true.
Yet investigators thought that satellite photos might have spotted some debris from the plane. That lead turned up nothing as well. Heather Sells has the story.
Investigators now believe that the missing Malaysian plane may have flown for 5 hours. That's 4 more than they first thought. The Wall Street Journal reports the clue is based on data automatically transmitted from the Boeing's engines.
This latest lead raises all kinds of new questions about who and why someone on board may have diverted the plane. And it also expands the search area again. If the plane flew for 4 more hours after last making contact, that is an extra 2,200 nautical miles.
But Malaysia's acting defense minister denies that the engine data shows an extra 4 hours of flight.
Those reports are inaccurate. The last transmission from the aircraft was at 0107, which indicated that everything was normal.
Authorities have been searching for 6 days now with nothing to show. Today, planes checked out an area where Chinese satellite images showed possible debris, but they found nothing. Malaysian authorities are facing tough questions for their handling of the investigation. At times, they've issued conflicting and confusing statements. For families of the missing passengers, the wait is excruciating.
There is no news whatsoever. It's just disappeared off the face of the earth. And if we could just find some wreckage or something, would be a help, probably, but not this.
American experts from the National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Aviation Administration have now joined the investigation after being shut out for days. So far, authorities have not ruled out any possible cause. That includes mechanical failure, pilot error, sabotage, and terrorism. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Which is to say, we don't have a clue. And it's just a shame for those who are suffering, the surviving families. They're in anguish on this thing, but it's strange. Well, as I mentioned before, it's gotten cold. here at home. It was funny. Again, just a day after the Senate held an all-night talk on global warming, they said, well, this proves global warming. It got really cold. Well, they have another snowstorm that hit much of the country. John Jessup has that story from Washington. Here's John.
Pat, the snowstorm has brought havoc across the Midwest and the Northeast, and many are hoping this will be winter's last blast. In Ohio, pileups involving at least 50 cars killed 3 people and seriously injured 1 state trooper.
The road conditions were poor. People couldn't get stopped in time, and he actually got pinned between the vehicles.
The pileups on both sides of the Ohio Turnpike caused miles of backup and hours of delay. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of homes and businesses in northern Illinois and Indiana lost power. Chicago got about 6 inches of snow, making this the Windy City's 3rd snowiest winter, just 1 week away from spring. The storm has been heading east to New England. Some places could see their heaviest snowfalls this season before it dissipates over Canada. And some of the major landmarks here in Washington, like Capitol Hill, went dark yesterday after strong winds temporarily knocked out power throughout the region. And speaking of blackouts, the United States could suffer a nationwide blackout if just 9 power substations were sabotaged on a hot summer day. And that blackout could last weeks, if not months. That's according to a federal study reported by the Wall Street Journal. All it would take would be coordinated attacks in the country's 3 separate power systems to knock out the entire network, according to people familiar with the study. You can find a link to the Journal's report on cbnnews.com. And on Monday, we'll have a special report on what could happen if terrorists attack the American power grid. Pat?
John, I picked up on this a few weeks ago, and I asked our news department to really get an in-depth study. So they've got people out in California, we've got people talking about it. But here, again, all you need is a 30-30 or a 22 rifle. Some old hunter can go by and just bang, and he can knock out a whole power station. Those things are very vulnerable. Nothing but a chain link fence separates them from the public. And the power, it wouldn't take but a few of those things to knock us into the Stone Age. It'll be very, very unpleasant. And so watch Monday. You don't want to miss the 700 Club on that in-depth report on the fragility of the power grid. John?
Pat, the Republican-led House of Representatives has passed a bill that would make it easier for Congress to sue a president for not enforcing federal laws. Conservatives and some liberals have criticized President Obama for simply picking and choosing which laws he decides to support. Under the bill, the House or Senate would have a fast track against any president who failed to carry out the constitutional duty to enforce the law. Some Republicans point out that when President Obama was an Illinois senator, he warned about the growing power of the presidency. Now Republicans say he's abusing that power himself. Pat?
I'm just really appalled at the abuses of that man. What does he think? We don't have a dictator. We don't have an emperor here in America. We have a government of balances, of checks and balances. The People's House, the People's Senate, the Congress of the United States. Then we have a chief executive faithfully sworn to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the land. And then we have a court that somehow acts as a referee along the way. But the power is in Congress. But you'd never know it watching this president. He just does whatever he feels is expedient at any given moment. And that is dangerous. Again, his approval rating down to 41% and plunging. John?
Pat, American pastor Saeed Abedini, imprisoned in Iran, is being denied medical treatment. Abedini's health is deteriorating as a result of prison beatings. The American Center for Law and Justice reports that over a week ago, he was moved from his jail cell to a private hospital for treatment. But now that treatment has stopped. Pastor Saeed was shackled and refused medical care, and hospital doctors said he must leave and return to prison. For more on this story and how you can join those calling for Pastor Saeed's freedom, visit our website, cbnnews.com. Terrorists backed by Iran kept up their rocket attacks against Israeli cities today after a barrage on southern Israel Wednesday night from Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel won't tolerate terror from Gaza.
If there's no calm in the south, There will be no calm in Gaza, and that's an understatement. I call upon the residents of the South to follow the instructions. The IDF will do its job.
Islamic Jihad fired more than 60 rockets inside Israel. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Visiting British Prime Minister David Cameron says his country stands with Israel on security matters.
Let me be absolutely clear about these attacks from Gaza. We condemn them completely. They are a reminder, once again, of the importance of maintaining and securing Israel's future and the security threats that you face. And you have Britain's support in facing those security threats.
Cameron went to Israel to promote the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks sponsored by the United States. Netanyahu said there can only be genuine peace if Iranian-backed terrorists can't fire rockets at Israel.
A Bible verse at the Air Force Academy has set off a debate over the Constitution and religious freedom. Cadets were pressured to remove a Bible verse written on a whiteboard. A cadet who holds a position of authority over others wrote Galatians 2:20 on the board outside of his dorm room. It reads, "I've been crucified with Christ, therefore I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me." The director of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation claims that amounted to an abuse of authority. The cadets later removed that verse. Catholic groups in Oklahoma have filed a new class action lawsuit to block portions of Obamacare's contraception mandate. The Catholic Benefits Association is a group of nearly 200 Catholic employers. They want to stop the mandate that forces employers to provide health insurance coverage for birth control and abortion-inducing drugs. Catholic leaders say those practices violate church teaching. Catholic churches are already exempt from the mandate, but Catholic businesses are not exempt. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, cbnnews.com.